Hi, friends. Hi, friends. It is April 15th, so it is now my birthday. I am now 45. I don't know, it's not really a particularly exciting birthday. It just is what it is. Yeah, I had a nice day out with my mom. We went for a walk, saw some pretty views, and then went for. Hi, Alma. Thank you. Hi, Jules. Yeah. We went for found a place where I could have something diabetically appropriate for lunch, and had a frittata with roasted veggies. That was very nice. And yeah, it was nice. Got a lovely call from my niece, whose 10th birthday is tomorrow. So that was very, very sweet. She was very happy with her present. Which, yeah, 10-year-olds are much more excited about birthdays than 45-year-olds. Which, 10-year-olds have had fewer of them. They are much more important. But anyway, so here I am, going to read more to you today. Where are we in the book? Well, Lydia just fell foul of purity culture because she's a 17-year-old nitwit who went off with a charming idiot. And, it's such a shame that 17-year-olds weren't allowed to be nitwits, or 16-year-olds weren't allowed to be nitwits at the time, because, boy, most of us are, aren't we? Perhaps not quite as empty-headed as Lydia, but, yeah. Oh, that purity culture. Anyway, chapter 47. I have been thinking it over again, Elizabeth, said her uncle as they drove from the town, and really, upon serious consideration, I am much more inclined than I was to judge as your eldest sister does of the matter. It appears to me so very unlikely that any young man should form such a design against a girl who is by no means unprotected or friendless, and who is actually staying in his colonel's family. That I am strongly inclined to hope the best. Could he expect that her friends would not step forward? Could he expect to be noticed again by the regiment after such an affront to Colonel Foster? His temptation is not adequate to the risk. Do you really think so? Cried Elizabeth, brightening up for a moment. Upon my word, said Mrs. Gardiner, I beg of you, I begin to be of your uncle's opinion. It is really too great a violation of decency, honour, and interest for him to be guilty of it. I cannot think so very ill of Wickham. Can you yourself, Lizzie, so wholly give him up as to believe him capable of it? Not perhaps of neglecting his own interest, but of every other neglect I can believe him capable. If indeed it should be so, but I dare not hope it. Why should they not have gone to Scotland, if that had been the case? In the first place, replied Mr. Gardiner, there is no absolute proof that they have not gone to Scotland. Oh, but their removing from the Chase into a hackney coach is such a presumption, and besides, no traces of them was found on the Barnet Road. Well then, supposing them be in London, they may be there, though, for the purpose of concealment, for no more exceptional purpose. It is not more likely that money should be very abundant on either side, and it may strike them that they could be more economically, though less expediently, married in London than in Scotland. But why all the secrecy? Why any fear of detection? Why must their marriage be private? Oh no, this is not likely. His most particular friend, you see by Jane's account, was persuaded of his never intending to marry her. Wickham will never marry a woman without some money. He cannot afford it. And what claim has Lydia? What attractions has she beyond youth, health, and good humour that could make him, for her sake, forego every chance of benefiting himself by marrying well? As to what restraint the apprehension of disgrace in the corps might throw on a dishonourable elopement with her, I am not able to judge, for I know nothing of the effects that such a step might produce. But as to your other objection, I am afraid it will hardly hold good. Lydia has no brothers to step forward, and he might imagine from my father's behaviour, from his indolence and little attention he ever seemed to give to what was going forward in his family, that he would do as little, and think as little about it, as any father could do in the matter. But can you think Lydia so lost to everything but love of him, as to consent to live with him on any terms other than marriage? It does seem it is most shocking indeed, replied Elizabeth, with tears in her eyes, that a sister's sense of decency and virtue in such a point should admit doubt. But really, I know not what to say. Perhaps I am not doing her justice, but she is very young. She has never been taught to think on serious subjects, and for the last half-year, nay, for a 12-month, she has been given up to nothing but amusement and vanity. She has been allowed to dispose of her time in the most idle and frivolous manner, and to adopt any opinions that came her way. Since the Shire were first quartered at Meriden, nothing but love, flirtation, and officers have been in her head. She has been doing everything in her power by thinking and talking on the subject, to give greater, what shall I call it, susceptibility to her feelings, which are naturally lively enough. And we all know that Wickham has every charm of person and address that can captivate a woman. But you see that Jane, said her aunt, does not think so ill of Wickham as to believe him capable of the attempt. Of whom does Jane ever think ill? And who is there, whatever might be their former conduct, that she would not believe capable of such an attempt till it were proved against them? But Jane knows, as well as I do, what Wickham really is. We both know that he has been profligate in every sense of the word, that he has neither integrity nor honour, that he is false and deceitful, as he is insinuating. And you really know all this? Cried Mrs. Gardiner, whose curiosity as to the mode of her intelligence was all alive. I do indeed, replied Elizabeth, colouring. I told you the other day of his infamous behaviour to Mr. Darcy. And you yourself, when last at Longbourn, heard in what manner he spoke of the man, who has behaved with such forbearance and liberality towards him. And there were other circumstances which I am not at liberty, which it is not worth while to relate, but his lies about the whole Pemberley family are endless. From what he said of Miss Darcy, I was thoroughly prepared to see a proud, reserved, disagreeable girl. Yet he knew to the contrary himself. He must have known that she was amiable and unpretending, as we have found her. But does Lydia know nothing of this? Can she be ignorant of what you and Jane seem so well to understand? Oh, yes, that is the worst of it. Till I was in Kent and saw so much of both Mr. Darcy and his relation, Colonel Fitzwilliam, I was ignorant of the truth myself. And when I returned home, the Shire were to leave Meryton in a week or two. And as that was the case, neither Jane nor I, whom I related the whole, thought it necessary to make our knowledge public. For what use could apparently be to anyone that the good opinion in which all the neighbourhood had him should then be overthrown? And when it was settled that Lydia should go with Mrs. Forrester, the necessity of opening her eyes to his character never occurred to me. That she could be in any danger from the deception never entered my head. That such a consequence as this should ensue, you may easily believe, was far enough from my thoughts. When they all removed to Brighton, therefore, you had no reason, I suppose, to believe them fond of each other? Not the slightest. I can remember no symptom of affection on either side, and had anything of the kind been perceptible, you must be aware that ours is not a family on which it could be thrown away. When first he entered the corps, she was ready enough to admire him, but so were we all. Every girl in or near Meryton was out of her senses about him for the first 2 months. But he never distinguished her by any peculiar attention, and consequently, after a moderate period of extravagant and wild admiration, her fancy for him gave way, and others of the regiment, who treated her with more distinction, again became her favourites. It may be easily believed that however little novelty could be added to their fears, hopes, and conjectures on this interesting subject by its repeated discussion, no other could detain them from long during the whole of the journey. From Elizabeth's thoughts it was never absent, fixed there by the keenest of all anguish, self-reproach, and she could find no interval of ease or forgetfulness. They travelled as expeditiously as possible, and sleeping one night on the road, reached Longbourn by dinner time the next day. It was a comfort to Elizabeth to consider that Jane could not have been wearied by long expectations. The little Gardiners, attracted by the sight of the chaise, were standing on the steps of the house as they entered the paddock, and when the carriage drove up to the door, the joyful surprise that lighted their faces and displayed itself over their whole bodies in a variety of capers and frisks was the first pleasing earnest of their welcome. Elizabeth jumped out, and after giving each of them a hasty kiss, hurried into the vestibule, where Jane, who came running downstairs from her mother's apartment, immediately met her. Elizabeth, as she affectionately embraced her, whilst tears filled the eyes of both, lost not a moment in asking whether anything had been heard of the fugitives. "Not yet," replied Jane. "But now my dear uncle is come, I hope everything will be well. Is my father in town?" "Yes, he went on Tuesday, as I wrote your word." "And have you heard from him often?" "We heard only once. He wrote a few lines on Wednesday to say that he had arrived in safety, and to give his directions, which I particularly begged him to do. He merely added that he should not write again till he had something of importance to mention." "And my mother, how is she? How are you all?" "My mother is tolerably well, I trust, though her spirits are greatly shaken. She is upstairs, and will have the great satisfaction in seeing you all. She does not yet leave her dressing-room. Mary and Kitty, thank heaven, are quite well." "But you, how are you?" cried Elizabeth. "You look pale. How much you must have gone through." Her sister, however, assured her of her being perfectly well, and their conversation, which had been passing while Mr. Gardiner and Mrs. Gardiner were engaged with their children, was now put to an end by the approach of the whole party. Jane ran to her uncle and aunt, and welcomed and thanked them both with alternate smiles and tears. When they were all in the drawing-room, the question which Elizabeth had already asked were of course repeated by the others, and soon found that Jane had no intelligence to give. The sanguine hope of good, however, which the benevolence of her heart suggested, had not yet deserted her. She still expected that it would all end well, and that every morning would bring some letter, either from Lydia or her father, to explain their proceedings, and perhaps announce the marriage. Mrs. Bennet, to whose apartment they all repaired, after a few minutes' conversation together, received them exactly as might be expected, with tears and lamentations of regret, invectiveness against the villainous conduct of Wickham, and complaints of her own suffering and ill-usage, blaming everyone but the person to whose ill-judging indulgence the errors of her daughter must be principally owing. "If I had been able," said she, "to carry my point of going to Brighton with all my family, this would not have happened. But poor dear Lydia had nobody to take care of her. Why did the Foresters ever let her out of their sight? I am sure there was some great neglect or other on their side, for she is not the kind of girl to do such a thing, if she had been well looked after. I always thought they were very unfit to have charge of her, but I was overruled, as I always am, poor dear child. And now here is Mr. Bennet gone away, and I know he will fight Wickham wherever he meets him, and then he will be killed. And what is to become of us all? The Collinses will turn us out before he is cold in his grave. And if you are not kind to us, brother, I do not know what we shall do." They all exclaimed against such terrific ideas, and Mr. Gardiner, after general assurance of his affection for her and all her family, told her that he meant to be in London for the very next day, and would assist Mr. Bennet in every endeavour for recovering Lydia. "Do not give way to useless alarm," he added. "Though it is right that to be prepared for the worst, there is no occasion to look on it as certain. It is not quite a week since they left Brighton. In a few days more we may gain some news of them. Until we know that they are not married, have no design of marrying, they do not let us give matters over as lost. As soon as I get to town, I shall go to my brother and make him come home with me to Gracechurch Street, and then we may consult together as to what is to be done." "Oh, my dear brother," replied Mrs. Bennet, "that is exactly what I would wish for. And now, when you get to town, find them out, wherever they may be, and if they are not married already, make them marry. And as for wedding clothes, do not let them wait for it, but tell Lydia she shall have as much money as she chooses to buy them after they are married. And after all she chooses to buy them, And above all things, keep Mr. Bennet from fighting. Tell him what dreadful state I'm in. I am frightened out of my wits, and have such tremblings, such flutterings all over me, such spasms in my side, and pains in my head, and such beatings at my heart, that I can get no rest, by night or day. And tell dear Lydia not to give any direction about her clothes till she has seen me, for she does not know which are the best warehouses. Oh, brother, how kind you are! I know you will contrive it all. But Mr. Gardiner, though he assured her again of his earnest endeavours in the cause, could not avoid recommending moderation to her, as well in her hopes as her fears, and after talking with her in this manner till dinner was on the table, he left her to vent all her feelings on the housekeeper who attended in the absence of her daughters. Though her brother and sister were persuaded that there was no real occasion for such seclusion from the family, they did not attempt to oppose it, for they knew that she had not prudence enough to hold her tongue before the servants, while they waited at table, and judged it better that one of the household, and not all, should comprehend all her fear and solicitude on the subject. In the dining room they were soon joined by Mary and Kitty, who had been too busily engaged in their separate apartments to make their appearance before. One came from her books, and the other from her toilette. The faces of both, however, were tolerably calm, and no change was visible in either, except for the loss of her favourite sister, or the anger which she herself incurred in the business, had given something more fretfulness than usual to the accents of Kitty. As for Mary, she was mistress enough of herself to whisper to Elizabeth, with the countenance of grave reflection, soon after they were all seated at the table. This is a most unfortunate affair, and will probably be much talked of. But we must stem the tide of malice, and pour into the wounded bosoms of each other the balm of sisterly consolation. Then, receiving in Elizabeth no inclination of replying, she added, Unhappy as the event must be for Lydia, we must draw from it this useful lesson, that loss of virtue in a female is irretrievable, that one false step involves her in endless ruin, that her reputation is no less brittle than it is beautiful, and that she cannot be too guarded in her behaviour towards the undeserving of the other sex. Elizabeth lifted her eyes in amazement, but was too much oppressed to make any reply. Mary, however, continued to console herself with such kind of moral extractions from the evil before them. In the afternoon, the two elder Miss Bennets were able to be for half an hour by themselves, and Elizabeth instantly availed herself of the opportunity of making any inquiries which Jane was equal to satisfy. After joining in general lamentation over the dreadful sequel of this event, which Elizabeth considered as all but certain, and Miss Bennet could not assert to be wholly impossible, the former continued the subject by saying, But tell me all and everything about it, which I have not already heard. Give me farther particulars. What did Colonel Foster say? Had they no apprehension of anything before the elopement took place? They must have seen them together forever, for Colonel Foster did own that he often suspected some partiality, especially on Lydia's side, but nothing to give him any alarm. I am so grieved for him. His behaviour was so attentive and kind to the utmost. He was in coming to us in order to assure us of his concern before he had any idea of their not being gone to Scotland. When that apprehension first got abroad, it hastened his journey. And was Denny convinced that Wickham would not marry? Did he know of their intending to go off? Had Colonel Foster seen Denny himself? Yes, but when questioned by him, Denny denied knowing anything of their plan, and would not give his real opinion about it. He did not repeat his persuasion of their not marrying, and from that I am inclined to hope that he might have misunderstood before. As Colonel Foster came himself, not one of you entertained a doubt, I suppose, of their being really married. How is it possible that such an idea should enter our brains? I felt a little uneasy, a little fearful of my sister's happiness with him in marriage, because I knew that his conduct had not always been quite right. My father and mother knew nothing of that. They only felt how imprudent a match it must be. Kitty then owned, with a very natural triumph in knowing more than the rest of us, that in Lydia's last letter she had prepared her for such a step. She had known, it seems, of their being in love with each other for many weeks. but not before they went to Brighton. No, I believe not. And did Colonel Foster appear to think ill of Wickham himself? Does he know his real character? I must confess that he did not speak so well of Wickham as he formerly did. He believed him to be imprudent and extravagant, and since this sad affair has taken place, it is said that he has left Meryton greatly in debt. I hope this may be false. Oh, Jane, had we been less secret, had we told what we knew of him, this could not have happened. Perhaps it would have been better, replied her sister, but to expose the former faults of any person without knowing what their present feelings were seemed unjustifiable. We acted with the best intentions. Could Colonel Foster repeat the particulars of Lydia's notes to his wife? He brought it brought it with him for us to see. Jane then took it from her pocketbook and gave it to Elizabeth. These were the contents. My dear Harriet, you will laugh when you know where I am gone. I cannot help laughing myself at your surprise tomorrow morning as soon as I am missed. I am going to Gretna Green, and you cannot guess with who. And if you cannot guess with who, I shall think you a simpleton, for there is but one man in the world I love, and he is an angel. I should never be happy without him. So think no harm to be off. You need not send word to Longbourn of my going, if you do not like it, for it will make the surprise the greater when I write to them and sign my name, Lydia Wickham. What a good joke it will be. I can hardly write for laughing. Pray make my excuses to Pratt for not keeping my engagement and dancing with him tonight. Tell him I hope he will excuse me when he knows all, and tell him I will dance with him at the next ball we meet with great pleasure. I shall send for my clothes when I get to Longbourn, but I wish you would tell Sally to mend a great slip in my work muslin gown before they all packed up. Goodbye. Give my love to Colonel Foster, and I hope you will drink to our good journey. Your affectionate friend, Lydia Bennet. Oh, thoughtless Lydia, cried Elizabeth when she had finished it. What a letter is this, to be written at such a moment? But at least it shows that she was serious on the object of her journey, whatever he might afterwards be persuaded to. It was not on her side a scheme of infamy. My poor father, how he must have felt it. I never saw anyone so shocked. He could not speak a word for full 10 minutes. My mother was taken ill, and the whole house was in confusion. Oh, Jane, cried Elizabeth. Was there a servant belonging to it who did not know the whole story before the end of the day? I do not know. Oh, I hope there was, but to be guarded at such a time is very difficult. My mother was in hysterics, and though I endeavored to give her every assistance in my power, I am afraid I did not so much as I might have done. But the horrors of what might possibly happen took from me all my faculties. Your attendance on her has been too much for you. You do not look well. Oh, that I had been with you. You have every care and anxiety upon yourself alone. Mary and Kitty have been very kind, and would have shared in every fatigue, I am sure, but I did not think it right for either of them. Kitty is slight and delicate, and Mary studies so much that her hours of repose should not be broken in on. My Aunt Phillips came to Longbourn on Tuesday after my father went away, and was so good as to stay till Thursday with me. She was of great use and comfort to us all, and Lady Lucas has been very kind. She walked here on Wednesday morning to console with us, and offered her services or any of her daughters, if they could be of use. She had better have stayed home, cried Elizabeth. Perhaps she meant well, but under such misfortunes as this, one cannot see too little of one's neighbours. Assistance is impossible, condolence insufferable. Let them triumph over us on a distance and be satisfied. She then proceeded to inquire into the measures which her father had intended to pursue while in town for the recovery of his daughter. He meant, I believe, replied Jane, to go to Epsom, the place where they last change horses, to see the postilions, and try if anything could be made out from them. His principal object must be to discover the number of the hackneyed coach which took them from Clapham. It has come with a fare from London, and he thought the circumstances of a gentleman and lady removing from one carriage to another might be remarked. He meant to make inquiries at Clapham. But if he could anyhow discover at what house the coachman had before set down his fare, he determined to make inquiries there, and hoped it might not be impossible to find out the stand and number of the coach. I do not know any of the other designs that he had formed, but he was in such a hurry to be gone, and his spirits so greatly discomposed, that I had difficulty in finding out even so much as this. Next chapter in a minute. I don't know if everyone knows this. The reason they're talking about Scotland is Scotland had different marriage laws, and you could marry without a parent's permission at a younger age. And so that was why people went to Gretna Green, which was the first town over the border. So Lydia thinks they're going to Gretna Green to get married. And then they went to London, where, they did not have the advantage of easy marriage. Their advantage of other easy things. Anyway, chapter 48. The whole party were in hopes of a letter from Mr. Bennet the next morning, but the post came in without bringing a single line from him. His family knew him to be all common occasions at most negligent and dilatory correspondent, but at such a time they had hoped for exertion. They were forced to conclude that he had no pleasing intelligence to send, but even of that they would have been glad to be certain. Mr. Gardiner had waited only for the letters to be sent off. When he was gone, they were certain of at least of receiving constant information of what was going on, and their uncle promised, at parting, to prevail on Mr. Bennet to return to Longbourn as soon as he could, to the great consolation of his sister, who considered it as the only security for her husband's not being killed in a duel. Mrs. Gardiner and the children were to remain in Hertfordshire a few days longer, as the former thought her presence might be serviceable to her nieces. She shared in their attendance on Mrs. Bennet, and was a great comfort to them in their hours of freedom. Their other aunt often visited, and always, as she said, with the design of cheering and heartening them up, though as she never came without reporting some fresh instance of Wickham's extravagance or irregularity, she seldom went away without leaving them more dispirited than she found them. All Meryton seemed striving to blacken the man, who but 3 months before had been almost an angel of light. He was declared to be in debt to every tradesman in the place, and his intrigues, all honoured with the title of seduction, had been extended into every tradesman's family. Everybody declared that he was the wickedest young man in the world, and everybody had begun to find out that they had always distrusted the appearance of his goodness. Elizabeth, though she did not credit above half of what was said, believed enough to make her former assurance of her sister's ruin still more certain. Even Jane, who believed still less of it, became almost hopeless, more especially as the time was now to come when if they had gone to Scotland, which she had never before entirely despaired of, they must in all probability have gained some news of them. Mr. Gardiner left Longbourn on Sunday. On Tuesday his wife received a letter from him. It told them that on his arrival he had immediately found his brother, and persuaded him to come to Gracechurch Street. That Mr. Bennet had been to Epsom and Clapham before his arrival, but without gaining any satisfactory information, and that he was now determined to inquire at all the principal hotels in town, as Mr. Bennet thought it possible they might have gone to one of them, on their first coming to London, before they procured lodgings. Mr. Gardiner himself did not expect any success from this measure, but his brother was eager in it, and he meant to assist him in pursuing it. He added that Mr. Bennet seemed wholly disinclined at present to leave London, and promised to write again very soon. There was also a postscript to this effect. I have written to Colonel Foster to desire him to find out, if possible, from some of the young man's intimates in this regiment, whether Wickham had any relations or connections who would be likely to know in what part of town he had concealed himself. If there was anyone that could be applied to with the possibility of gaining such a clue as that, it might be of essential consequence. At present we have nothing to guide us. Colonel Foster will, I dare say, do everything in his power to satisfy us on this head. But on second thoughts, perhaps Lizzie could tell us what relations he has now living better than any other person. Elizabeth was at no loss to understand from whence this deference for her authority proceeded, but it was not in her power to give any information so satisfactory in nature as the compliment deserved. She had never heard of his having any relations except a father and mother, both of whom had been dead for many years. It was possible, however, that some of his companions in the shire might be able to give more information, and though she was not very sanguine in expecting it, the application was something to look forward to. Every day at Longbourn was now a day of anxiety. But the most anxious part of each was when the post was expected. The arrival of letters was the first grand object of every morning's impatience. Though letters which, whatever good or bad was to be told, would be communicated, and every succeeding day was expected to bring some news of importance. But before they heard again from Mr. Gardiner, a letter arrived from their father with different quarter. A letter arrived for their father from a different quarter, from Mr. Collins, which, as Jane received directions to open all that came for him in his absence, she accordingly read, and Elizabeth, who knew what curiosities his letters always were, looked over her and read it likewise. It was as follows. My dear sir, I feel myself called upon by a relationship and my situation in life to console with you on the grievous affliction you are now suffering under, of which we were yesterday informed by a letter from Hertfordshire. Be assured, my dear sir, that Mrs. Collins and myself sincerely sympathize with you and your respected family in your present distress, which must be of the most bitterest kind, because proceeding from the cause which no time can remove. No arguments shall be wanting on my part that can elevate so severe a misfortune, or that may comfort you under a circumstance that must be of all others most afflicting to your parents' mind. The death of your daughter would have been a blessing in comparison to this. And it is more to be lamented because there are reason to suppose, as my dear Charlotte informs me, that this licentiousness of behaviour in your daughter has proceeded from a faulty degree of indulgence. Though at the same time, for the consolation of yourself and Mrs. Bennet, I am inclined to think that her own disposition must be naturally bad, or she could not be guilty of such an enormity at so early an age. Howsoever that may be, you are grievously to be pitied, in which opinion I am not only joined by Mrs. Collins, but likewise by Lady Catherine and her daughter, to whom I have related the affair. They agree with me in apprehending that this false step in one daughter will be injurious to the fortunes of all others. For who, as Lady Catherine herself condescendingly says, will connect themselves with such a family? And this consideration leads me moreover to reflect with augmented satisfaction on a certain event of last November, for had it been otherwise, I must have been involved in all your sorrow and disgrace. Let me advise you then, my dear sir, to console yourself as much as possible, to throw off your unworthy child from your affections for ever, and leave her to reap the fruits of her heinous offence. I am, dear sir, etc., etc. Mr. Gardiner did not write again till he had received an answer from Colonel Foster, and then he had nothing of pleasant nature to send. It was not known that Wickham had a single relation with whom he kept up any connection, and it was certain that he had no near one living. His former acquaintance had been numerous, but since he had been in the militia, it did not appear that he was on terms of particular friendship with any of them. And there was no one, therefore, who could be pointed out as likely to give any news of him. And in the wretched state of his own finances, there was a very powerful motive for secrecy, in addition to his fear of discovery by Lydia's relations, for it had just transpired that he had left gaming debts behind him to a very considerable amount. Colonel Foster believed that more than £1,000 would be necessary to clear his expenses at Brighton. He owed a good deal more in the town, but his debts of honour were still more formidable. Mr. Gardiner did not attempt to conceal these particulars from the Longbourn family. Jane heard them with horror. "A gamester!" she cried. "This is wholly unexpected. I had no idea of it." Mr. Gardiner added in his letter that they might expect to see their father at home on the following day, which was Saturday. Rendered spiritless by the ill success of all their endeavours, he had yielded to his brother-in-law's entreaty that he would return to his family, and leave it to him to do whatever occasion might suggest to be advisable for continuing their pursuit. When Mrs. Bennet was told of this, she did not express so much satisfaction as her children expected, considering what anxiety for his life had been before. "What! Is he coming home, and without poor Lydia?" she cried. "Sure he will not leave London before he has found them. Who is to fight Wickham and make him marry her, if he comes away?" As Mrs. Gardiner began to wish to be at home, it was settled that she and her children should go to London at the same time that Mr. Bennet came from it. The coach, therefore, took them the first stage of their journey and brought its master back to Longbourn. Mrs. Gardiner went away in all the perplexity about Elizabeth and her Derbyshire friend that had attended her from that part of the world. His name had never been voluntarily mentioned before them by her niece, and of the kind half-expectation which Mrs. Gardiner had formed of their being followed by a letter from him, it ended in nothing. Elizabeth had received none since her return that had come from Pemberley. The present unhappy state of the family rendered any other excuse for the lowness of her spirits unnecessary. Nothing, therefore, could fairly conjecture from that, though Elizabeth, who by this time was tolerably well acquainted with her own feelings, was perfectly aware that she had known nothing of Darcy, she could have borne the dread of Lydia's infamy somewhat better. It would have spared her, she thought, one sleepless night out of 2. When Mr. Bennet arrived, he had all the appearance of his usual philosophic composure. He said as little as he had ever been on the habit of saying, made no mention of the business that had taken him away, and was some time before his daughters had the courage to speak of it. It was not till the afternoon, when he had joined them at tea, that Elizabeth ventured to introduce the subject, and then, on her briefly expressing her sorrow for what he must have endured, he replied, "Say nothing of that. Who should suffer but myself? It has been my own doing, and I ought to feel it." "You must not be too severe upon yourself," replied Elizabeth. "You may warn me against such evil. Human nature is so prone to fall into it. No, Lizzie, let me for once in my life feel how much I am to blame. I am not afraid of being overpowered by the impression. It will pass away soon enough." "Do you suppose them to be in London?" "Yes, where else can they be so well concealed?" "And Lydia always wanted to go to London," added Kitty. "She is happy, then," said her father dryly, "and her residence there will probably be of some duration." Then, after a short silence, he continued, "Lizzie, I bear you no ill will for your being justified in your advice to me last May, which, considering the event, shows some greatness of mind." They were interrupted by Miss Bennet, who came to fetch her mother's tea. "This is a parade," cried he, "which does one good. It gives such an elegance to misfortune. Another day I will do the same. I will sit in my library in my nightcap and powdering gown, and give as much trouble as I can. Or perhaps I may defer it till Kitty runs away." "I am not going to run away, Papa," said Kitty fretfully. "If I should go to Brighton, I should behave better than Lydia." "You go to Brighton? I would not trust you so near it as Eastbourne for £50. No, Kitty, I have at last learned to be cautious, and you will feel the effect of it. No officer is ever to enter my house again, nor even pass through the village. Balls will be absolutely prohibited unless you stand up with one of your sisters. You are never to stir out of doors till you can prove that you have spent 10 minutes of every day in a rational manner." Kitty, who took all these threats in a serious light, began to cry. "Well, well," he said, "do not make yourself unhappy. If you are a good girl for the next 10 years, I will take you to a review at the end of them." All right, chapter 49, the last chapter for today. 2 days after Mr. Bennet's return, as Jane and Elizabeth were walking in the shrubbery behind the house, they saw the housekeeper coming towards them, and concluded that she came to call them to their mother. They went forward to meet her, but instead of the expected summons, when they approached her, she said to Miss Bennet, "I beg your pardon, ma'am, for interrupting you, but I was in the hopes that you have got news from town, so I took the liberty of coming to ask." "What do you mean, Hill? We have heard nothing from town." "Dear madam," cried Hill in great astonishment, "don't you know that an express came for Mr. Gardiner?" He's been here for half an hour, and the master has had a letter. That was a terrible accent. I think that was the worst one yet. Away ran the girls, too eager to get in to have time for speech. They ran through the vestibule into the breakfast room, from thence to the library. Their father was in neither, and they were at the point of seeking him upstairs with their mother, when they were met by the butler, who said, "If you are looking for my master, madam, he is walking towards the little copse." Upon this information, they instantly passed through the hall and once more, and ran across the lawn after their father, who was deliberately pursuing his way towards a small wood on one side of the paddock. Jane, who was not so light nor so much in the habit of running as Elizabeth, soon lagged behind, while her sister, panting for breath, came up with him and eagerly cried, "Oh, Papa, what news? What news? What have you heard from my uncle?" "Yes, I've had a letter from him by express." "Well, what news does it bring, good or bad?" "What of there's good to be expected," he said, taking the letter from his pocket, "but perhaps you would like to read it." Elizabeth impatiently caught it from his hand, and Jane now came up. "Read it aloud," said their father, "for I hardly know myself what it is about." Grace Church Street, Monday, August 2nd. My dear brother, at last I am able to send you some tidings of my niece, and such as, upon the whole, I hope will give you satisfaction. Soon after you left me on Sunday, I was fortunate enough to find out in what part of London they were. The particulars I reserve till we meet. It is enough to know they are discovered. I have seen them both. "Then it is always as I always hoped," cried Jane. "They are married." Elizabeth read on. "I have seen them both. They are not married, nor can I find there was any intention of being so. But if you are willing to perform the engagements which I have ventured to make on your side, I hope it will not be long before they are. All that is required of you is to assure your daughter, by settlement, her equal share of the £5,000 secured among your children after the decease of yourself and my sister, and, moreover, to enter into an engagement of allowing her, during your life, £100 per annum. These are conditions which, considering everything, I had no hesitation in complying with, as far as I thought myself privileged for you. I shall send this by express, that no time may be lost in bringing me your answer. You will easily comprehend from these particulars that Mr. Wickham's circumstances are not so hopeless as they are generally believed to be. The world has been deceived in that respect, and I am happy to say will be some little money, even when all his debts are discharged, to settle on my niece. In addition to her own fortune, if, as I conclude will be the case, you send me your full powers to act in your name throughout the whole of this business, I will immediately give directions to Haggerston for preparing a proper settlement. There will not be the smallest occasion for you coming to town again, therefore stay quietly at Longbourn, and depend on my diligence and care. Send back your answer as soon as you can, and be careful to write explicitly. We have judged it best that my niece should be married from this house, of which I hope you will approve. She comes to us today. I will write again as soon as anything more is determined on. Yours, etc., Edwin Gardner. "Is it possible?" said Elizabeth when she had finished. "Can it be possible that he will marry her?" "Wickham is not so undeserving, then, as we thought him," said her sister. "My dear father, I congratulate you." "Have you answered the letter?" said Elizabeth. "No, but it must be done. Soon." Most earnestly did she then entreat him to lose no time before he wrote. "Oh, dear father, come back and write immediately. Consider how important every moment in such a case." "Let me write for you, if you dislike the trouble yourself." "I dislike it very much," he replied, "but it must be done." And so saying, he turned back with them and walked towards the house. "And may I ask," said Elizabeth, "by the terms, I suppose, must be complied with?" "Complied with? I am only ashamed of him asking so little." "And they must marry. Yet he is such a man." Yes, they must marry. There is nothing else to be done. But there are two things which I want very much to know. One is how much your uncle has laid down to bring this about, and the other how am I ever to repay him?" "Money, my uncle?" cried Jane. "What do you mean, sir?" "I mean that no man in his senses would marry Lydia on so slight a temptation as 100 a year during my life and 50 after I am gone." "That is true," said Elizabeth, "though it had not occurred to me before. His debts to be discharged, and something still to remain. Oh, it must be my uncle's doing. Generous, good man. I am afraid he has distressed himself. A small sum could not do this. No, said her father. Wickham's a fool if he takes her with a farthing less than £10,000. I should be sorry to think so ill of him in the very beginning of our relationship. £10,000? Heaven forbid! How is half such a sum to be repaid? Mr. Bennet made no answer, and each of them, deep in thought, continued silent till they reached the house. Their father went to the library to write, and the girls walked into the breakfast-room. And they are really to be married, cried Elizabeth as soon as they were by themselves. How strange this is, and for this we are to be thankful, that they should marry. Small is the chance of happiness, and wretched as is his character, we are forced to rejoice. I comfort myself in thinking, replied Jane, that he certainly would not marry Lydia if he had not a real regard for her. Though our kind uncle has done something towards clearing him, I cannot believe that £10,000 or anything like it has been advanced. He has children of his own, and may have more. How could he spare half £10,000? If we are ever able to learn what Wickham's debts have been, said Elizabeth, and how much is settled on his side on our sister, we shall expect to know what Mr. Gardiner has done for them, because Wickham has not a sixpence of his own. The kindness of my uncle and aunt can never be requited. Their taking her home and affording her their personal protection and countenance is such a sacrifice to her advantage, as years of gratitude cannot enough acknowledge. By this time she is actually with them. If such a goodness does not make her miserable now, she will never deserve to be happy. What a meeting for her when she first sees my aunt! We must endeavour to forget all that has passed on either side, said Jane. I hope and trust that they yet will truly be happy. His consenting to marry her is proof, I will believe, that he has come to a right way of thinking. Their mutual affection will steady them, and I flatter myself they will settle soon quickly, and live in so rational a manner as may in time make their past imprudence forgotten. Their conduct has been such, replied Elizabeth, as neither you nor I nor anybody can ever forget. It is useless to talk of it. It now occurred to the girls that their mother was in all likelihood perfectly ignorant of what had happened. They went to the library, therefore, and asked their father whether he would not wish them to make it known to her. He was writing, and without raising his head, coolly replied, "Just as you please." "May we take uncle's letter to read to her?" "Take whatever you like and get away." Elizabeth took the letter from his writing-table, and they went upstairs together. Mary and Kitty were both with Mrs. Bennet. One communication would therefore do for all. After a slight preparation for good news, the letter was read aloud. Mrs. Bennet could hardly contain herself. As soon as Jane had read Mr. Gardiner's hope of Lydia being soon married, her joy burst forth, and every following sentence added to its exuberance. She was now in an irritation as violent from delight as she had ever been fidgety from alarm and vexation. To know that her daughter was married was enough. She was disturbed by no fear of her felicity, nor humbled by any remembrance of her misconduct. "My dear, dear Lydia," she cried, "this is delightful indeed. She will be married. I shall see her again. She will be married at 16. My good, kind brother. I knew how it would be. I knew he would manage everything. How I longed to see her, and to see dear Wickham too. But the wedding clothes. I will write to my sister Gardiner about them directly. Lizzie, my dear, run down to your father and ask how much he will give her. Stay. No, I will go myself. Ring the bell, Kitty, for Hill. I will put on my things this in a moment. Dear, dear Lydia, how merry we shall be together when we meet." Her eldest daughters endeavoured to give her some relief to the violence of these transports by leading her thoughts to the more obligations of which Mr. Gardiner's behaviour laid them all under. "For we must attribute this happy conclusion," she added, "in a great measure to his kindness. We are persuaded that he has pledged himself to assist Mr. Wickham with money." "Well," cried her mother, "it is all very right. Who should do it but her own uncle? If he had not his own family of his own, and I and my children must have all his money, as you know, and for the first time we have ever had anything from him except a few presents. Well, I am so happy. In a short time I shall have a daughter married, Mrs. Wickham. How well that sounds! And she only 16 last June. My dear Jane, I am in such a flutter that I am sure I cannot write. So I will dictate. You will write for me. We will settle with your father about the money afterwards, but the things should be ordered immediately. She then proceeded on all the particulars of calico, muslin, cambric, and would shortly have dictated some very plentiful orders, had not Jane, through some difficulty, persuaded her to wait till her father was at leisure to be consulted. One day's delay she observed would be of small importance, and her mother was too happy to be quite so obstinate as usual. Other schemes, too, came into her head. I will go to Meryton, said she, and as soon as I'm dressed, and tell the good news to my sister Phillips. As I am come back, I can call on Lady Lucas and Mrs. Long. Kitty, run down and order the carriage. An airing would do me a good deal of good, I am sure. Girls, can I do anything for you in Meryton? Oh, here comes Hill. My dear Hill, have you heard the good news? Miss Lydia is going to be married, and you shall have a bowl of punch to make merry at her wedding. Mrs. Hill began instantly to express her joy. Elizabeth received her congratulations among the rest, and then, sick of this folly, took refuge in her own room, that she might think with freedom. Poor Lydia's situation must at best be bad enough, but it was no worse. She need to be thankful. She felt it so, and though in looking forward neither rational happiness nor worldly prosperity could be justly expected for her sister, in looking back to what they had feared only 2 hours ago, she did feel all the advantage of what they had gained. That's the end for today. Stupid purity culture, to be forced to marry a man because you ran off with him. I mean, better not to run off with a man, especially when you're 16, but yeah. Well, anyway. Such as things were in 1815, etc., etc. Thank you. I was having fun with the accents. I'm not sure if Mr. Collins or Lady Catherine is my favorite accent at the moment. Mr. Collins is a lot of fun, though. We will have another visit from Lady Catherine, not for another couple chapters, though. Okay, well, it's been nice. I'm going to go enjoy the rest of my birthday and have an early night. You all take care.